Hi, I'm reading Gold Chord by Amy Carmichael. This is chapter 26, prelude to chapter 26. Lord, make me part of this green wood, that I may praise and worship thee. All here is beautiful and good and full of melody. Lord, make me part of this green wood, that I may worship thee. O sunlight on the ruddy ground, O moss thou covering charity, oh, every small thing perfect found, like you I want to be. Like you I would be perfect found, my Father, fashion me. As moves the wind above the wood, and sings rejoicing in each tree, so fill me with thine utmost good, the bliss of harmony. O Father, singing through the wood, fill me with harmony. Chapter 26, Where the Birds Built Their Nest. If this that we have told is a thread of our gold cord, and it is, for nothing is more uniting than prayer about guidance, so is our use of the hottest weeks of the year when vigorous life is impossible on the plains. In the South, we have two such seasons, one in April and May, the other in September and on till the monsoon breaks about the middle of October. South India is rich in her hill stations, and we all owe much to them and to the welcome of friends there and to their kindness to us. But from the time of the first converts, to be so far from home was not a simple matter. Our kind hostess could welcome a few, but as they increased, it was impossible to take them, and we could not leave them in their loneliness to the devastating temptations that beset converts. Would a mother desert a sorely troubled child just when its need was greatest? And soon there were little ones too, and Indian sister workers who required change and rest and refreshment as much as we did. What were we to do? We looked up to the Lord our leader, and then we looked up to the hills that lay so near Danapur, and the thought came to try these nearer hills. The first trial proved disastrous. I hear you were carried down on a stretcher. There was more than a hint of, now you will see that it can't be done. But we did not see. It was not the fault of the hills that we had come to grief. So next year we went again. We stayed in a little house that belonged to the forest department. Elephants haunted those uplands, and bears and tigers, sambar, wild pigs, deer, the ever-fascinating monkey, the huge monitor lizard like a toy crocodile, and countless furred and feathered marvels. Life was all gladness there. Once the children, entranced, saw a tigress at play with her cubs. They rushed down to call me, but the tigress heard their cries of joy and took her cubs elsewhere. And once one of us met a tiger full face, but he too politely moved away. Later, we were to meet panthers, wild dogs, bears, and other forest people. Not every day, but often enough to lend zest to life. And the children, and we with them, scrambled up dizzy rocks to almost inaccessible places, to the amazement of the foresters, who had not seen before, they said, such adventurous children. This was nectar to me. And indeed, they were splendid climbers and never knew fear. Cool air, climbs, heavenly views, a mountain river, ferns, flowers, mosses, cushiony moss was a special pleasure. It does not grow on the plains. What was there left to wish? A dear little story is connected in my mind with our first visit to that woodland place. We left Danapur one evening in the heat of early September and spent a breathless night in a forest hut under the hills. Next morning, the children set off to walk the 3,000 feet to the house, leaving me to follow when the chair coolies came. But they were late, and I walked on alone, not sorry at first to have the solitude of that hillside path after the crowded months. The way was long, and it was evening when I reached a stream not far from the house and stopped to rest, wishing the ineffectual wish of all such hours that the others down in the heat could share this coolness and water beauty, especially the dear two who had been away in April and May and were now holding the fort at Donapur. And then from the other side of the stream I heard merry laughter and shouts of welcome, and the children flew across like a flock of blue forest birds, and there were kisses and embraces so eager and so loving that we might have been parted for weeks. Then in the evening light that filled the air with gold shine, we all went up to the house, and my tiredness fell from me in the happiness of being with the children again. It was one of those earthly pictures of heavenly things that cannot be forgotten. How many mothers every evening must cross the last stream and be met by their own dear children who reached home first? We had hoped that this pleasant place among the hills would suffice us, but there was no certainty of always being able to rent it. And as the family grew larger and new workers from England joined us, it was clear that we needed to have a house of our own. Rising to 6,000 feet and only a few hours' walk from us were those mountains of peace that had so often brought us calm and the sense of eternal strength. Their heads push out from among green woods. Those woods are pierced with ravines down which swift torrents flow. Below lie the plains, touched with silver where there is water and bounded by the blue ribbon of the sea. So we explored our mountains and found many a lovely place within half a day's climb, but none appeared quite perfect till we came upon a wide ravine opening on a horseshoe valley so folded up among wooded hills that its discovery seemed almost an adventure, and yet it was open to every wind that blew. There was an old coffee estate of 40 acres up there. It was for sale for £100. Norscrip tells the story that is still full of a sweet freshness for us, like the young green of the forest. We had not thought of buying anything so extensive. We had thought of a much smaller undertaking, and yet it was a very desirable place, and there was no other to be had anywhere near Donapur to be compared with it for convenience or health or beauty. So after making sure that we might do so, we asked for £100 if our father wished us to buy the ravine. The time of the prayer was about noon, June 11th, 1917, and the place the river that flows through the ravine. In a quiet half-hour's rest in the shadow of a great rock, the psalms for the day, morning and evening, had been refreshing. This word especially smiled up from the page like a friend. God showeth me his goodness plenteously. It was the first to be painted and put up in our forest home. We returned home in the evening to find that a mail had unexpectedly arrived, and in it was £100. For a moment we thought it was the sign. Then we saw that it was earmarked for a forest house. But how could we build a forest house if we had no forest? Or was it that we were to be content with the smaller thought of the previous months and build in the few acres the forest department might let us use? Thus, being uncertain, we waited. There were temptations to hurry, for the temple authorities of Four Lakes, a town near Donapur, who were thinking of buying it, were moving, and with them, money is nothing. That particular temple owns lakhs of rupees and much land. But what of the hazard of running before the Lord? It may cost what thou knowest not to bring thee home from there. So till August 25th we waited, and on that day in the early morning we set forth with a friend, experienced traveler in many lands, who was staying with us at the time to look at the place again. It was a perfect day, the kind of day when the trees of the woods sang out at the presence of the Lord, and our friend was charmed. If only I had the means, I would buy it at once, he said. and he tried hard to induce the owner, who was living in a cave in the face of a cliff, to let us buy the site that would be perfect for a house. But the old man was firm. He would sell all or none. He knew that he could sell to the temple if we did not buy it, and no one can explain why he did not do so. The only explanation, we think, is that in the purpose of our God, the place was meant for us. We knelt down then among the gray boulders, in whose crevices wild pineapples were growing, their pinky crimson tufts of fruit and spikes of bluish green leaves showing brightly on the gray. And we prayed for some clear sign, something we could not possibly mistake, to assure us that the whole enchanting ravine, with its uncontaminated water, for the heights above were too steep for commercial uses, and so the water was clean, was to be ours. It was late when we reached home. Again, an early mail was in, but we were tired and went to bed without opening it. In the morning, we found again 100 pounds, and this time it was a gift straight from heaven, a legacy. But still, does this sound unbelievable? We feared to run before our guide and embark on costly follies, for land is the least of forest expenses, as we were soon to find. And yet it did look like an assurance repeated in order that we might go on without a doubt that this was to be. And 4 days later it was shown that we might take it. So, on the 14th of September, the place was ours, and the sign was confirmed when a third gift of exactly that sum, 100 pounds, came, earmarked for its purchase. To tell it like this makes it seem as though hundreds of pounds had a pleasant habit of dropping upon us, but it is not so. 6 months passed before anything approaching so large a gift reached us again, and even then it was a broken sum and not a complete round hundred. As soon as we were sure, we began to build a house. And now, had we doubted, which indeed we did not, we could have known that our Lord was in this thing, for there was sharp opposition, and all that man and devil could do to stop that house being built was done. The place had been sacred to a godling called the Demon of the Chain. Its late owner, a Mohammedan, had feared the demon and had never disturbed the shrine. Even the little brass censer and oil cup and bell, which stood on the open altar, had been left untouched. We took the idol down. At first, none of the prophesied ills occurred, but soon it was as though 1,000 invisible, malevolent things were plucking at us from all sides at once. One night, almost in despair, for the clouds were rolling in great white billows down the hillsides, sure sign of imminent rain, and the house, built not of stone in lime, but of stone in mud, was not roofed. We suddenly recognized with whom our contests lay. There was only one thing to do. We gathered all the workmen who were bent on going home to their villages that night and would not return for a week, and read for our own strength of soul the 27th Psalm, they listening in silence to the mighty words, strong as the mountains round about us, eternal in truth. And in the pause that followed, we told them to go if they chose. We were not afraid. The Lord our God would send us help. Yea, even if no other but the angels of heaven would dare to build with us. There was no answer to this, but they looked up astonished, almost as though they expected to see the angels of whom we so confidently spoke descending in the clouds upon the mountains. And I think that if they had gone down, we too would have looked up for the angels. For human help there was none. And truly, where man's help fails, God's is near. But the men were turned from their purpose. One by one they shuffled off to their grass huts under the rocks, and the house was saved. Every foot of that house was built with prayer, so we cannot wonder that to many of us it is full of memories as of a presence shining through a very thin veil. "It is a fragrant room when a bundle of myrrh is the chief thing there," said Robert Murray McCheyne. It is indeed. Year by year, ever since that year, 1918, little groups have gone up expecting glorious discoveries of Christ and his person, beauty, work, and peace, and they have not been disappointed. It was new to some that the Holy Spirit would take of the things of Christ and show them to us without an interpreter, as it were. And there were joyful times together, too. By together, I mean with the Indian sisters for whose sake we are here. And yet, perhaps the chief gain of the forest was its stillness. Be still and know that I am God. But the test of the worth of such times is the staying power afterwards. The forest had done its best. It had given a river and a swimming pool, mountains to climb, and pure air flowing up from the sea. But would the effect of all this last? Would there be as much gain as might be expected from the more usual kind of holiday? There was. We who were responsible for the work found that all who had been together there had learned to understand one another in a new way. The young Sitis had grown together with their Indian companions in a new sweet intimacy of spirit. When the difficult days came, that do come at times, they were often able to help one another because of that uniting. And later, when the boys' work began, it was the same with the Indian and English brothers. After a while, we built another and larger house, and here again there was a fight. The battle for the soul of a certain brigand chief, Raj, of a later chapter, had begun, and those who claimed that soul for its destruction saw to it that we should be harassed in the rear. The houses of the carpenters were burned down, masons were threatened, coolies were terrorized. Relatives on the plain in mysterious unanimity fell sick, or were married, or buried, often quite frequently, so that we kept a careful list of these events. We were often left without anyone. An unseasonable rain fell, greatly adding to the anxieties of building without lime. To build with lime carried up to such a height would have been very expensive. But the more such powers contested, the more surely we knew that the Lord of hosts was with us. Satan is too wise a strategist to waste ammunition on vanity. Does he see further than we do? Does he see the part this house was to play in the campaigns of the future? And yet he is strangely circumscribed. He does not seem to have known that the Holy Child was safely sheltered in Egypt when he moved Herod to slay the innocents, nor could he show Elijah's cave to Jezebel. Comfort to us sometimes when we had to hide a child from the devouring enemy. So here again he was limited. The house was built and hallowed. Once a botanist came to our forest. He found plants belonging to higher zones growing freely there. He said that we have an unusual climate. And doctors come up, and they told us the same. We gain more than the height, about 3,000 feet, would lead one to expect, and we are not surprised. For he who knew all the ravines on the mountain chose it for us. This forest life together supplies one of the threads that make the gold cord of this story. There must be a special tie between Moses and Elias, who met their Lord on the hilltop in Palestine and heard him talk of his passion. And what golden cords must unite Peter and James and John, who, when the others had gone away, saw no man save Jesus only with themselves. End of chapter 26. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in chapter 27.